Okay. Can you all hear me at the back? Could you raise your hand if you can hear me at the back, please? Okay, thank you very much. So, welcome to the Great Data Debate at Big Data London 2024. We've got a fantastic panel with executives from AWS, from IBM, from Snowflake, from SAP and Calibra here. So, rather than read through official intros about them, I'm going to let them introduce themselves today. So let's start out with ladies first. Parul, please go ahead.
Parul Mishra. I lead product management for IBM's Watson X technology, which includes AI, governance, data, and some of the assistance and orchestration engines. So all of our portfolio that's been rebranded within the Watson X portfolio.
Okay, Rahul.
Hey folks, Rahul Pathak from AWS. I'm the VP for our Gen AI and AI and machine learning go-to-market. I've been at AWS about 13 years working on databases, analytics, and everything data.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Anupam Dada. I co-lead Snowflake AI research. And I just joined Snowflake 3 months ago, where my previous company, which I had founded, called Truera, which was in the AI observability space, got acquired. And before starting Truera, I was a professor at Carnegie Mellon University for about 12 years. So lots of gray hairs.
Mark.
Hi, everyone. Mark Giel, I'm at SAP. I'm part of our data and analytics development leadership team. I have responsibility for product management for our technology architects and delivery.
And last but not least, Stan.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Stan from Calibra. I feel like the ant with all of these giants on the stage, but I'm one of the co-founders of the company that's now 16 years ago. And I'm on my third role in the company. Today, I'm Calibra's chief data citizen, which probably means nothing to you, but I'm responsible for our data strategy, our data products, and our data infrastructure. And the reason why we don't call it chief data officer is because we want to remind all the data people that you win in data if you win the hearts and minds of all the data citizens in your organization. Thank you.
Okay, so, all right, then let's get going. So what I'm going to do is break this down into 5 main areas. First of all, we're going to look at futures of analytics and AI, since it's pretty well top of mind here at the show. I'm going to look at data architecture modernization, and we're going to look at data and analytics sort of foundational stuff, and data products and data sharing. And then, you know, you guys have all got research departments, and so you'll know, you know, some of the things that you're working on. And I think a lot of people here will want to know, what do you see, you know, is on the horizon that you can talk about that companies are going to have to think about going forward. So let's get started. Let's start talking about, you know, the future of analytics and AI. And if I look at the last 10 years or more, it's been crazy in this space. Data science, data lakes, the Hadoop era, you know, we had the whole Spark era and all of that going on. And that's been going on for a long time, building classic machine learning models and data science workbenches emerging, some of which are your own products and other ones here at the show. But more recently, in the last 18 months, it's been a whirlwind around generative AI. You know, since the emergence of ChatGPT, probably around about February 2023 timeframe, to now, to the point where it's everywhere, all over the show floor, for example, here. And, you know, it's penetrated pretty well every aspect of computing today, you know, where we're in data management, content management, databases. It's in applications. It's in business processes. And all I keep seeing is every week almost another large language model is out, and they're leapfrogging each other like crazy at the moment. But it seems to be that, you know, companies getting their head around this, and yet we're now seeing even more movement underfoot around things like, well, I'll get to it, around AI agents in a second. But let's sort of say, when I talk to my clients as an industry analyst, some of the questions that they're asking around the whole AI scene right now are that, we're seeing a sort of side effect, well, not necessarily a side effect, but a requirement for this whole Gen AI thing, which is vector databases. And at the same time, we've also got relational database vendors who've been out there for decades now adding new vector data types, vector functions into their databases as well. So, we've got, it seems to be vector databases everywhere. They're popping up like popcorn. It's almost like, well, in order to use Gen AI in a particular tool, you need a vector database. And then, by the way, you've got to enrich it with your data to make it enterprise aware and stuff like that. So, given, this situation, how should companies manage all of this vector stuff? I mean, it's vector databases, and they're there to try and stop hallucinations. But, what's the right approach given that, we could have multiple vector databases shipping with other tools. We could have, relational databases that people have also having vector types and functions in there, whether that's classic DB2, whether it's Redshift, whether it's, any other database, HANA, for example. Snowflake? What's the situation? I mean, what's the right approach to handling all of this?
So I can start. I mean, I think, at its essence, vectors are a data type and an indexing strategy. And so, we believe, and I think many people see, that Gen AI is going to be pervasive in terms of the types of things it's going to touch from a customer experience perspective. But ultimately, to take advantage of Gen AI, especially in a world where everyone has access to the same models, you're going to have to get your data and use that in conjunction with AI to create differentiated outcomes for your business and your customers. And so vector databases are a way of encoding your data in a form that an LLM can then process and incorporate to come up with customized answers. And so the approach we've taken at AWS is twofold. One is we work with great partners that are vector database specific, folks like Pinecone or Weaviate or others that are building vector databases from scratch. We've also invested quite a bit in adding vector support to the databases that we offer, like Aurora with Postgres, or MemoryDB, which is a Redis-compatible variant. And I think as with all things, like we've seen with JSON databases, you'll have people adding them on as data types, but you'll also have standalone systems. And if you've got a big existing investment in databases, adding vector types to that so you eliminate having to move data between systems will be easier. If you're starting from scratch, you can explore kind of bespoke architectures. So I don't think there's going to be one definitive answer. I think it's going to vary a little bit based on what you need to do.
Anyone else want to add to that, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, the approach we've really taken is to think about where we need the different technology capabilities. One is vector capabilities, right? We also think about graphing in sort of close conjunction with that. But because we're not trying to solve the technology problem itself, but the business problem, we then look at, okay, how do we then apply this to our product portfolio, our application portfolio? So, we've included it within HANA. There was this old sort of adage that I don't care what the question is, the answer is HANA. In this case, that's certainly true. But I guess that we will see, a number of different vector use cases depending on the capability, depending on the use case. And then it's about how do you segment and how do you manage the different data types accordingly. So we see it, we use it, and we use our own. We have looked at third party, but we thought it was something that was better to build ourselves.
Okay. Just out of interest, how many of you are using generative AI right now? If you could show me a show of hands within your organization. How many of you, keep your hand up if you've got multiple vector databases already within your organization? Oh, okay, not so many. Okay, so, or how many people don't know how many vector databases they've got right now? Okay, that's more interesting. All right, okay. All right then, so is this, am I talking about a level of complexity that there isn't any complexity, or what do you think here?
I think we're still early, right?
Still learning.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, but then the other thing is, given that generative AI is going into everything, whether it's within applications, whether it's in BI tools, data engineering tools, data governance technologies, or you've got a platform for AI automation. It seems that, well, with all of the new data being created within an enterprise on a continuous basis, that if we're going to keep these large language models enterprise data aware, that we're going to be practically continuously running chunking and embeddings in order to populate vector databases. And it seems to me, given the amount of data that we have, we could be into billions, if not trillions of vectors. So what does that say to me? That says, how big is this thing going to be? How much data is this going to take? And then there's another problem. What if I'm building these vector databases, albeit that it's a numerical representation of bigger data, it's still going to be big in its own right. But if every time we want to ask a question, we've got to go and access these vector databases to get an answer, we need an index. And so we've seen lots of vector indexes appear on these vector databases. So, I have some questions here, like, how on earth are we going to keep vector indexes up to date? I mean, this is a real problem, having read around the research and talking to some of my clients. How are we going to keep this up to date if we're going to be into billions or trillions of vectors being generated on a continuous basis?
So I think the bigger question is, do we need to? Like, I feel it's a frenzy right now. Like, at the end of the day, when you look at data, you look at the shape of the data, right? Whether you want it transactional or relational, and then you look at the workloads that data is going to serve. I think vector databases or the RAG AI technique is very impactful for AI workloads, but not for everything else.
Right.
But the fad and the frenzy right now is vector databases are going to solve every problem in the world. And therefore, we must find a solution collectively for this one problem. And I personally don't think it's such a big problem. I think it's one technique. I think there will be other techniques which will be better, finer. But I think it's a space that's evolving, and any one of us that says we have the right answer and is the definitive answer for the next 50 years is lying.
50 years, yeah, too right.
Not sure you can look further than next week.
So maybe if I can add a little bit. And this showed up a little bit in my talk in the morning. Even for question answering, now it's well recognized that just working with embeddings is not the best approach, right?
Right.
So you want to combine embedding representations. That's a very fundamental technology, don't get me wrong. This is one of the big innovations that has powered LLMs and this class of models and applications. But as you start getting up from the lower levels of the infrastructure, like vector databases and even models, to the higher level applications which ultimately bring value to the business, it's already well recognized that even for question answering and RAG-based approaches, you want to take a much more hybrid search approach, which combines vector databases and semantic retrieval with more traditional keyword-based retrieval, and then you do re-ranking after that.
Okay, so it's not the answer to.
It's not the whole answer.
Right,
it's an
right,
important
it's
part of the
it's
answer.
part of it, right.
But I think just to finish the thought here, we will want to think about much more multimodal approaches, which is the other big trend that we are only scratching the surface of right now, that for structured relational data, we have one class of techniques. For images and text, it's all embeddings. But now we are starting to see embeddings that represent all of these things. And then there are specialized techniques for each modality, which will have to come together in some fundamental ways. And that's where some of the new innovations will be.
But do you think, therefore, with with relational databases already adding this kind of functionality, that vector databases are just a temporary phenomenon? I mean, like if I already have bought, one of your database products, for example, and you're putting that functionality in there, well, and you can support that functionality as a component, why do I need another specialist database for that? I mean, it's like, as you say, it reminds me of, like XML databases, and then they got consumed. JSON got consumed. You know what I mean? So isn't that the same thing that's going to happen here?
It may or it may not. I think like in each new class of technology, there are some new challenges, and you are starting to get into that, right? Keeping these indexes up to date in incremental fashion as large volumes of data come. These are not like totally solved problems yet.
No, I don't think they are. I mean, I think to me, I still think this is an issue for a lot of organizations, and we're still seeing research in and around it. But, to me, given what if Gen AI democratizes everything and becomes the dominant way in which we interact, whether you're generating code or whether you're generating queries to get answers back or explaining insights or whatever, given the amount of new data and the amount of stuff that we need to keep up to date all the time, it does seem to be that we need performance of this stuff in order to make it deliver full value for the enterprise.
Yeah, there's fundamental problems here still to be solved.
All right.
Consolidation is still unclear, but there's a business requirement for consolidation as well. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
All right. Well, let's leave that.
Maybe if I can just add,
sorry,
Mike.
Stan, yeah, go ahead.
So I think what you're seeing is very normal. We said it before. It's happened before with JSON and XML and graph databases. So I think if you're really leading in innovation, you're probably going to go with a best-of-breed vector database because they're going to go faster, more focused. And over time, yes, you're right. The DB2s and the Oracle databases and the MySQL databases, they'll add it, right? But maybe those are the ones that are later in the innovation stage, right? So I think it's a best-of-breed versus, I already have it problem.
But even there around large language models, it seems we're now pronouncing those as legacy, and the new kid on the block is agents. And we're all now, like 2 years ago, it was data mesh, was the cool term here. Last year it was Gen AI. Now it's agentic, and agentic is cool. So we're being inundated with all this stuff about agents are going to rule the world kind of thing. So could you, for some of us out here still trying to consume this stuff, which is moving at lightning pace at the moment, what's the benefits of AI agents over standalone agents? What's it bringing to improve accuracy? Because it's pretty clear that even a standard LLM is still going to hallucinate. So what do you see is the benefit of AI agents, and what's it bringing to the party?
So I think that what we saw last year with LLMs and all the innovation, there's already commoditization really quickly. I mean, the price went down, it's open source, and the innovation quickly jumped to the application layer from infrastructure, LLM, to application, and those are agents. And agents are autonomous. An LLM is just a component of an agent, maybe with memory in a vector database or a reasoning component and whatnot. Maybe even some machine learning stuff inside of the agent. So the weird thing is how quickly that innovation is jumping. How quickly, to your point, agentic is becoming so interesting to everyone.
Yeah, maybe to build on that a little bit, the promise of agentic applications is that you can have a less sophisticated model, let's say GPT 3.5 versus GPT 4. And if you have these layers of workflow added to it around reflection, which means the agents are checking its own work, it's reflecting on its work, tool use, where it's not just the LLM that's producing the final answer, it might do a web search, it might call your SQL compiler, has access to a range of tools. Then there is planning, where the LLM is trying to figure out what's the I have a complex question to answer. How do I decompose it into smaller components, questions, and then potentially use 3 different tools to get partial answers back? Then I summarize them to produce the final response.
Right.
So techniques like that, like reflection, tool use, planning, and then multi-agent. It's interesting, right? Like in software development, we usually have one set of people who are in product, who write PRDs, a different set of engineers who architect the system, then we have people who implement the code, and then we have testing. So multi-agent systems essentially does that, where you have 4 different agents, and suddenly the accuracy goes up a lot. So we have seen results where, for code generation, for example, if you just use GPT-4, you get about 67% accuracy, which is a big step up from GPT 3.5, which may be around 40%. But if you wrap it in this kind of agentic workflow, now on benchmarks like human eval, it goes up to 90, 95%. And that's the promise. So next year, if I were to predict, we would still be talking about agents. We'll be talking about one other thing as well, which we are not talking about right now, which I won't predict just yet. But I do think agents is real, and the app layer is where we should be paying attention to.
Okay, so the real benefits in terms of accuracy coming out of this.
But I will say, though, I think there is still going to be a ton of innovation at the model layer. I don't think we're done seeing the improvements. And I think model capabilities are going up. People are still going to have a choice of models, and then we will see models optimized for particular types of workloads.
But in a way, like in machine learning, we ended up with AutoML, right? So like, it was almost like, well, which has the best algorithm? And then it said, oh, screw it. Let's just run through all of them and see which one wins. Do you think that's what's going to happen here?
I think we'll see elements of that, but I do think we will live in a world where multiple models will exist targeted at different types of use cases.
Right.
And I do think the agent, I think to me, one of the ahas on the agent side of things is that, we've typically lived in a world of declarative workflows where you say do A, then do B, then do C. Whereas with agents, you can declare a goal, like this is my objective, go figure out how to make it happen. And that's, I think, a pretty exciting way to operate, and it's a big mental shift for a lot of us. So I do think it's going to be a very exciting evolution over the next year or so.
That's actually, and I know you want to jump to the next question, but I think that's exactly how I feel. And I do think agents will be the next era of monetizing models. But I think what you said is, we've had agents that followed a deterministic process, right? And every business has deterministic processes. You can't always be probabilistic, right? And that workload gets handled today through agents. We just don't call it agents, we call it automation, but those are automation agents. Tomorrow, the promise is, what if these agents could plan? They could decompose very sophisticated user intent without help from a human, route it to the right, it could be LLM, could be something else, could be an automation, and then bring all that together, reason, and provide a holistic response back to the user. All done through this probabilistic and learning through the real time. I think that's the difference, and that's the promise.
Okay, well, let's build on that a little bit more then. So, Gen AI has emerged, but automation was alive and well before Gen AI emerged, right? We had RPA.
Yep.
We had intelligent document processing going on. We've had prescriptive analytics, making automatic alerts and recommendations, even automatic decisions, all before Gen AI emerged into the mix. So we're not saying that Gen AI is going to replace all of that. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. So if that's the case, then how does Gen AI integrate with this? Is it the case that we do this planning, we do this reasoning, and Gen AI then sequences the whole thing and says, here's how to solve this? Is that where we're going? Are we going to hand over control, let the bot just do it all? or is it that the human's going to want to keep hold of the steering wheel here?
So my experience is, and which our customers as well and users, people don't think in binary terms, right? So it's not, I want a Gen AI summarization function. Now I'm going to sit back and do something else. Now I want to
No.
go automate something. Now I'm going to sit back and do something else. That's not how we think. Our workflows are they go from all the way logging into a system, wanting to, let's say, hire a candidate, post a job opening, but also summarize the job description. So whether it's coming from Gen AI, whether it's coming from automation, or whether it's coming from a vector database to a user, doesn't matter and should not matter, right? For them, they need a task to be done, and that has to be done in a very sophisticated way. So automation, Gen AI, all of these are techniques that have to come together behind the scene
Yes.
and provide the same capability to the user through a conversational AI which is sophisticated and fluid enough for business users to use.
Mark.
I mean, when we started to look at where we could apply Gen AI to different tasks, different workflows, I think initially we came up with like 250 different use cases that we could see across our portfolio. And then we've spent the last 9 months just rationalizing down to really where it can add real value. And it just becomes part of a workflow that may include automation. You may use Gen AI as an NLP front end to ask a question of the system to get the right information back, and then you refine based on that. So it's just one of the tools that we have, and we look at how we can apply it to solve specific problems.
Okay, so we're really basically saying it gets integrated into the natural workflow to take over automation where it's appropriate to do so, and steps out when it's not.
Yeah, I think it's additive to these techniques,
Yes.
and I think the big step forward is it's also adaptive. Like with our current systems, you have to sort of have a priori defined all the things it's going to do. I think in a generative system, it can be more responsive to a new input and come up with a new plan, but in some cases, use the existing techniques.
Okay, well, let's move on to AI governance then, because obviously a lot's happened in a year, particularly here in Europe. So, for example, on the 1st of August this year, the European Union AI Act became live legislation. So 27 countries around Europe are now on the hook for holding AI risk registers and everything else, and all the penalties that go with it. And the UK is pretty well following on behind, and won't be long before we see the same kind of legislation here. So, there's a lot of questions around AI governance. So, what would you say, or what are you doing to help companies, get well established in, getting ahead of this AI governance problem in order to be able to have the confidence to know that they're going to remain compliant going forward?
We're partnering with Calibra, so I'll leave it to Stan.
So, first of all, Mike, I would urge you and everyone to look at AI governance not only through the lens of regulation, right? And yes, there is the EU AI Act in Europe, but there are currently, according to MIT Technology Review, over 100 bills in Congress in the US about AI rules. Right? So the Americans like to talk about Europe as we're the rule makers.
Much like data governance has multiple jurisdictions,
So
you're going to see the same problem in AI, right?
But I mean, the regulation creates sort of a forcing function, focus and budget as to what you need to do. But ultimately, AI governance is about the risk and mitigating that risk of your organization, putting a system in production whereby you maybe don't know what it's going to do. Think about it in this way, right? So you have a self-driving car, and the self-driving car hits somebody. What are you going to do? Are you going to sue the robot? It doesn't work. So you're going to sue the manufacturer of the car or the operator of the car. So if your organization puts an AI system or any system in production, then the organization or the operator becomes responsible, and that means you have to take care of the risks. Let me give you the silly example. which is not regulatory, but just facepalm worthy. So you had a chatbot on the Chevy website, you know, Chevy the car, and somebody put a chatbot on there. And a little bit after the user started using the chatbot started recommending to buy a Tesla. So then imagine you're the CEO that's like, oh, what am I doing here, right? So AI governance is really about collaboration, you know, between the data officer, the technical people, the business people, but also security and privacy. And then it's about what is the use case? What are you going to do with this AI thing? And you know, does this match internal and external constraints? Then you're going to look at what data do I need to train or to RAG, and then you're going to look at documenting the model. You know, how does it work? Explainability, and then the biggest piece is the actual putting it into production, because now you're looking at a non-deterministic system, right? So you're going to have to observe how that's acting in reality and adjust where necessary.
But like, for example, if people can just use conversational queries, how do you stop them accessing data where their ID isn't allowed to access that data? I mean, if something else is going off and querying the data on their behalf, how do you stop them seeing data that they shouldn't? I mean, surely, I mean, that's part of AI governance, isn't it?
Well, first of all, I think a lot of interfaces to AI are going to be through agents, right? So it's not going to be all, I'm going to talk to this system the whole time. That sort of makes me feel of those systems that you have on the phone. You know, you call on the phone and then it's press 1 for this, press 2 for that. It's a very clunky interface. So I think a lot of agents are maybe going to work without a text interface. And if you want protection from bad queries, that's, as we were saying earlier, right? You wrap a system around the LLM. The LLM is just a component.
Okay.
No, and to build on that, I mean, I do agree with Sten's points. Like, it's not really just about regulation, right? I think governance is really about making sure that the right people have access to the right data, both from an input perspective, and then from a prompt perspective, and then from a response perspective. So if I'm using a particular document to customize what I'm asking the LLM, I should have access to that document. It's a pretty fundamental operation. HR can access certain things that maybe a business analyst can't. And so that core idea of data governance needs to flow through into these new use cases. And I think one of the things that I talk about with a lot of customers when it comes to putting AI into production is, how can I be sure that the right data is being used? How can I be sure that it's not going to be a runaway type of system? So governance is fundamental.
Leakage, you don't want PII leakage in these things.
Yeah, and the thing we talk about, it's a quote from a book I really like, but it's discipline equals freedom. If you set the right guardrails in place, you can actually set innovation loose, because you know that people are going to operate within the constraints that you want them to operate within. And that's
I think what we're saying is some of these guardrails will be baked into the software in order to keep people on the right track.
I mean, they have to if you're going to go into production. It's just not going to be.
All right, let's move away from the whole Gen AI thing for a minute. Let's go on to talk about data architecture modernization. And you know, it seems to be that most companies today have still got siloed analytical systems, streaming analytics. Could be data science on a data lake, could be data warehouses, graph databases, you know, all of these silos going on for different kinds of analytical workloads. And, you know, what we've seen over the years is, and certainly in the last couple of years, last year and in 2022 at this show, all kind of architectures emerging. You know, SQL data mesh, we've got SQL lake houses, now we've got ice houses. Now we got all kinds of stuff going on out there at the moment, and the promise was there's a gazillion architecture options which are the right way forward. But you know, in the last year, I think one of the things that I pointed out when I opened the show this morning is massive uptake amongst database vendors in general of open tables, open table formats, whether that be Iceberg, whether it be Delta Lake or maybe Hoodie. So, for example, you know, Snowflake way back in 2022 announced Iceberg. But I mean, you know, generally speaking, what we've now got is databases with proprietary tables and database access to open tables. But of course, open tables allow multiple engines to access that data. and we can do things like ACID and streaming and batch on those tables, all together. So now that we've got these kind of open table formats with all of this kind of new capability, I mean, do you think that we're going to see a phase out of proprietary tables, and we're going to just see universal open table formats as the way forward? I mean, if that was the case, we wouldn't have to migrate a database. I mean, it's like, well, forget that. Why do we have to migrate from database X to database Y when everybody supports open table? I mean, is that what you think is going to happen here? Or is it, no, we're just going to have some open tables and some proprietary?
I think it's going to be a mix, honestly, because I think we see this evolution every time there's a change in technology. You've got people embracing it. I do think there's some real benefits to open table formats in terms of portability, integration across analytic engines. But then there's going to be advantages to proprietary formats with performance, updating, multi-table transactions. And so different use cases will have different sweet spots. I think one thing that will be true, though, is that open table formats are here to stay. And I do think we will see integrated governance across proprietary and open formats. But will we end up with, hey, proprietary is dead for all time? I don't think that's true. The pendulum's going to swing back. It's a constant state of innovation.
Right. Okay, so then, but do you think we can, with that, given that multiple types of analytical engines, Spark, databases, Presto, etc., can access open table formats, are we going to be able to tear down these silos rather than having copies of data for this kind of analytical workload, another data store? Are we going to be able to get rid of that? Do you think that's definitely feasible?
I think there'll be definitely progress in that direction. And Iceberg is a good example of that. There's been quite a bit of consolidation around the Iceberg open table format. Snowflake has been leaning in heavily on that, as have others. And there's just a lot of benefit to customers from having that flexibility, right? And that's a big driver. Open standardization helps with that. And I think, though, I also agree that with new technology, what also will likely emerge is another set of workloads will emerge 2 years from now that we haven't quite thought of yet,
right,
which might, again, require adjustments. So that's something to keep in mind. But definitely the move towards open table formats is very meaningful. And it's very good for customers.
But I mean, obviously, as Patek pointed out, there are use cases where they're not appropriate. But for example, analytics seems to be a good place to put them to be able to bring these analytical workloads together. But yet still, if you look at what's going on with Gen AI that we've been talking about, if we're now moving to a world where you can just type in a question, or even better, just ask it with your voice and go voice to text and then go in that way and have a query generated. If it's that easy to ask questions, it tells me we are going to break through this glass ceiling where BI tools could never get. We've had 25% to 30% of the employee base using BI tools, and for years now we've never been able to get beyond that. Now we're saying you don't need to have to figure out the UI of these tools. You can sit there and ask a question and get an answer back. Now, if that's the case, concurrent users are going to go through the roof, which then makes me ask the questions, are open tables going to scale to handle massive amounts of concurrent usage? Because right now, I don't see any benchmarks from anybody saying this thing's going to handle huge amounts of concurrent usage. I see plenty of people talking about, oh yeah, big tables, and all, but that's kind of data science asking complex questions. What about concurrent users on the end of Gen AI, copilots or whatever, just asking questions? Are these things going to handle it?
I mean, I don't think, I do think Gen AI will make data integration a lot easier, and things like agents will go across multiple systems. And we're investing a lot in technologies like zero ETL to connect the dots between systems. But I also don't think Gen AI is going to change the physics of data access. If you've got high concurrency, low latency needs, you're going to have a tier that aggregates that data. It's probably going to be hard to achieve that with data that's changing a lot. And so I think some of these fundamental problems in data architecture will still remain, but it will be easier to span multiple systems, and you won't perhaps need to be an expert to get answers that span multiple systems.
Yeah, definitely. The barrier of entry, the level of data literacy you need is significantly decreasing. Because this LLM can now sort of interact with you and maybe help you define your question.
Absolutely.
So you don't need to know anymore, do I use a bar chart or a
No,
pie
but at the
chart?
same time, every time I ask a question, I'm
yes.
generating a query out the back end of this thing, right?
So you're right. This
If
will
you're
create
hammering these
a
things,
proliferation. There's going to be a lot more people asking questions.
and and the promise is put your data in open tables, and now I'm going to hammer this thing with lots of concurrent users. Just asking questions. It's like, well, are these things going to perform or not? I mean, is it going to stand up to that kind of heat, rather than just put a bunch of big, huge amounts of data in there for a group of data science? Is a very different workload.
Just put some more GPUs on it.
I didn't know you worked for NVIDIA.
We all do now.
I mean, I think time will tell whether it scales. I think it will. I mean, we now see this where we're seeing many different types of workload coming together in one fabric. I mean, that's essentially the strategy we've taken, right, where we have multi-model capabilities. We are using open table formats, working with each of the hyperscalers, working with Snowflake, working with Databricks. We see some partition in terms of understanding the difference between ML use cases versus Gen AI versus purely analytical. But you can now do that in a much more open framework, which makes it accessible to more. And we're certainly starting to allow our users to get access to that. Time will tell, where the performance bottlenecks come. But at the moment, we're pretty happy with the performance that we're getting and the use cases that we can solve.
Okay. All right, let's look a bit more at what I would call data and analytics foundations. I mean, certainly, we're really in an era now where data and analytics and AI has kind of become central. It used to be when I started, it was marketing department or the finance department, sales maybe, that would back these kinds of initiatives. Today, they want it in HR. They want it, every department of the business wants this stuff. And so demand's coming from everywhere for all of that. And at the same time, as more and more data being generated, we got data in SaaS applications that are out there in multiple locations. We got data in multiple clouds. We got data in various kinds of databases and data stores. We've got data on premises. We've got data being streamed in off of the edge, off of thousands, if not millions of devices that are coming in there. So I think for most organizations, they've got a distributed data estate. Let me just check that. How many of you out here would say that you have a distributed data estate right now with data in lots of different data stores in multiple clouds on-prem at the edge? Okay. A lot of hands going up, so it's not all in one location. So, if that's the case, then, everybody's cleaning and integrating data for different analytical purposes. But it seems to me now that the demand for data engineering is skyrocketing because of this. And because they've got to integrate data from so many different places. But in the past, we've been using best of breed for all of this. And the problem is there's no, dare I say it, this is the 9th year I've had to say this at this show. There is still no industry standard for metadata interchange. Still not, right? And it doesn't seem to be anytime soon on the horizon. So what I'm seeing with a lot of my clients saying, we can't make best of breed tools work because we can't exchange metadata between them. And so we're having to rework again and again in different tools to do the same tasks. And so what I'm seeing a lot of my clients now doing is looking at the idea of rationalizing this and sort of looking at common platforms. So, I mean, do you think that's where we're headed? I mean, like technology rationalization for a kind of common data fabric is going to be the way forward? I mean, let's face it. I mean, I think you're all in the data fabric business, or a lot of you certainly are. I mean, would you say that you know the way forward is a single vendor data fabric now? Is it that we should ditch best of breed tools, or are we just going to have to expect to pay systems integrators thousands and thousands of pounds while we, you know, access APIs trying to get metadata out of different tools?
I mean, we're trying to solve this just for our own data sets at SAP, right? We've got HR data, we've got finance data, we've got procurement data, we've got, you know, across all business processes. And the approach we're taking is to start to build data products that we manage on behalf of our customers, where we've done the metadata management and the alignment to our own ORD, which is our own sort of metadata format. And we're now starting to work with players in the market like Microsoft, AWS, Azure, and others to look at how do we start to establish that as a standard. We need to get our stuff in order first to make it available.
So SAP is the standard?
No, we're the standard at SAP, and we now want to look at how we can leverage that across our ecosystem, because we're working with each of the platform players as well. But a lot of the business data is sitting there within our estate, and we want to see how we can solve those problems for customers.
But does that mean that customers have to use your model,
I mean, we are providing that for customers as
can't
data
they have
products.
their own?
Do they? I don't know. You said there was no standard, so we're trying to at least.
You're trying to provide them with your standard.
No,
Isn't that lock-in?
No. That's why we're having open discussions with other players in the marketplace.
I'll take a slightly different approach to that. I do agree with everything you said, and IBM and SAP have been partners for years, decades. I don't want to say privilege, but the opportunity to take all of IBM's own data, put it all together into one data lake, right? And the data fabric and governance, all that good stuff. Included finance data, HR data, marketing data, so all different types of data, right? Started very promising. I was like, all right, I think we can do this. We have the best tool, best technology, best minds. But it's harder than you think for all the reasons that you said, because the governance, the fabric, and just the basic things like sales data is measured differently than finance data, right? Quarter close versus, so if I say September 18, give me my P&L, no one can ever give me my P&L, because the way my company would work and would rationalize sales data at this point in time could be weekly versus quarterly, and everybody has their own cycles. Same with marketing data, and if I start asking questions, give me the leads for this data or for that, it all starts getting very complicated very fast. So the point I'm making is, it is hard work, like bringing data sets together cross-domain.
But you know, IBM has Cloud Pak for Data. You've got DataSphere.
Yeah.
You've got a governance
but
platform.
It's not a turnkey solution.
You've got glue. So I mean, isn't like, well, I should use a single vendor data fabric to try and do all of this? Or do I buy bits of tools and hope to God that they're going to work together?
I mean, I think I agree with what my colleagues have said here. This isn't static in time. This is a continuously evolving thing. And the tools provide a set of capabilities, but they've got to be mapped to the realities and the complexities of our individual businesses. So I think there will always be a desire to simplify, but I don't think we're going to get to one static utopian end state where it just works.
No.
Okay.
I think it's honestly even getting worse, because if you look at the number of vendors out here, it's growing, right? If you look at Matt Turk's map, applications and data, the logos have become so small you can't even read them anymore. So I think the number of data tools, places to store them, move them, is still growing. So the fragmentation is increasing at.
So the problem's getting harder. It's getting
I
more
would argue the
complex.
problem is getting harder. Because 5 years from now we'll buy another sort of data warehouse, so another place to put data. It's fragmenting more.
But that,
Surely if it's fragmenting more, you should hide the complexity, not force it on the customer.
no, and I do think, especially with AI and the evolution of ML, our tools will get better. But the flip side is we're generating roughly 10x more data every 3 years. I don't know why we expect it to not get harder. We have a bigger appetite. We are measuring more things. We're trying to accomplish and generate more value with data. So it will take more work.
Okay, all right. Let's talk about data governance. This has been at the show, I guess, quite a long time now since we introduced data governance theater, which has been pretty well jammed out every year, and certainly, is a never-ending problem. But from when I've been speaking at data governance conferences for the last 20, 25 years, it started out as data quality. Now we've got privacy, we've got access security, we've got retention, we've got loss prevention, we've got usage behavior, we've got data sharing. The whole thing's gone under a governance umbrella. And, because the fact that the scope of this is expanded, and data catalogs, I think, are now at the center of all of this, whether it's Glue catalog or IKC from IBM or SAP has that. I'm not sure about Polaris yet in terms of an enterprise catalog or even the catalog within Calibra. But, with no metadata standard, you can't tell me catalog of catalogs is easy here, if we can't figure out how to exchange metadata because there's no industry standard. But, I mean, really, if we're now dealing with, Gen AI appearing in data catalogs, and many companies have got different tools from different vendors for different governance disciplines. So you have a data quality tool over here. I've got maybe a data access security tool or privacy tooling over there. I've got something for maybe retention or for data sharing. Is the answer that we should try and do end-to-end governance with best-of-breed tools? Or do you see that we're going to get a universal data governance platform to try and share metadata and handle this governance problem end-to-end under one platform?
I think it should be in one platform called Colleagues.
But you were going to say that, right? Really? I mean,
I'm shocked you would say
oh,
that.
I didn't know you were going to represent. Are you going to recommend AWS for that, Stan? Or
Well, you have to look at, because I think you were conflating a few words. Right? You said governance and then you said catalog, but a catalog is in most data platforms a way to expose metadata, right? That doesn't make it governance.
Oh, absolutely not.
It's just a piece of it.
That's what I'm saying. But a data catalog is not enough to do the end-to-end governance thing, right? I mean, it's got to be more than that. But we can define policies in a catalog, but how do you enforce it across a distributed data estate when there's no standards here,
Well,
right? Are you
takes
guys all
effort.
going to build agents?
That takes effort.
And-
So
and
I'll give you an example, Mike.
I don't want to say agents again, but are we going to do like we did with distributed systems management at the beginning of the 2000s when we had client server all everywhere, and we needed one way to manage multiple servers? So we saw the birth of Tivoli and all those guys. And we had software agents and all the platforms in order to manage it all. Are we going to do the same with governance? Is that what we see? I mean, that we can put our policies in one place and then we're going to have agents to enforce it? Or is it, too hard a problem? All these tools are out there. Let the customer figure this out. This is hard.
Well, here's an example of what we've done, right? You have a policy about access to data, for example. And yes, if there was one perfect metadata standard, then we could just push it to all other systems. But instead, what we have to do from our position as Colibra is say, okay, you can make a policy, and we'll do the hard work of connecting to the APIs of all the other players. To SAP, to AWS, to Databricks, to Snowflake, and so on and so forth. Why? Because our customers have data in all of those systems.
Yeah, so you have to push that stuff out there. Does that mean you're building So every
That's our job.
right. So you're building, okay, proprietary connectors to every single one of those platforms. That's what I'm saying. So you're enforcing it by pushing that down into the other underlying.
Yeah,
technology.
I think we're all trying to simplify life for customers, where customers want to think in terms of, this is the policy for my organization, this is how I define my business. And then our tools are going to get better and better at connecting those policies to the underlying data repositories. But as we collaborate or share data across departments, across companies, we're going to have to agree on a common set of meaning. But that no tool is going to solve that universal standard for us.
Okay, this is a bit depressing. Come on, guys. I was hoping for better than, oh, sorry, guys. It's all well
Wait,
complexity.
I got the solution.
You figure it out.
We're going to solve it with a multi-agent data mesh.
Well, look, AI is out here. Are we going to see AI going into governance automation? Do you think that's really happening? Is that
I
going to
think
happen?
I think it's
happening already.
happening.
Yeah.
All right, okay. Well, that's a bit of positive news, isn't it? All right, okay. Let's go on to quickly talk about data products and data sharing. A couple of years ago here at Big Data London, data mesh was absolutely everywhere. It dominated everything. And obviously, now we see data sharing as being critical to success within most organizations. And we've seen the emergence of things like data marketplaces, which I said this morning has doubled the number of vendors from a year ago. I had a slide a year ago, and half the vendors that I showed this morning weren't even on there. Now they all are. So there's no question there's been a huge number of data marketplace offerings appearing in the last year. But I often make a distinction between data products and analytical products. By analytical products, I mean machine learning models. It could be BI reports. It could be AI bots or Gen AI agents that I could invoke on demand or whatever it may be. But it seems to me that there's a lot of options out there to build data products. People were saying, build it on Kafka, build it on a lakehouse, do it on cloud storage accounts, do it on a data warehouse database. But do you see data products, now as the norm, as the way forward to kind of get incremental, shareable data building blocks, if you like, as the way forward to doing this, rather than trying to say, come up with some monolithic data store that's going to do everything? Is data products the way forward?
That's the approach we're taking, because we're pulling data from different source systems across the enterprise. Even across our portfolio, they don't necessarily have a common domain model, and this is what we're applying to those data products. So we have data products that are coming from SuccessFactors, from Ariba, from core S4 solutions, and then we do the alignment on behalf of the customer so that they can then solve those complex analytical use cases. They can solve for dual and co-pilot integration if they want to start to use that as a front end. So
you're publishing data products with your common data definitions so that people can share data in a consistent manner.
And we've taken a similar approach. I think we think data products, data marketplaces all matter quite a bit. We've got products like Data Zone that make it easy to define this, but ultimately you can think of data products and data mesh as sort of a federated approach to data. Individual teams or departments own what they're offering and they vend it either as data sets or APIs. And then you have the fabric, which is a more centralized approach. And typically any large organization will have a combination of these. Like we have an enterprise data warehouse and a data lake, and then individual teams will publish their own data that will be consumed through individual contracts. So it tends to be a hybrid approach at scale.
Okay. We've just got under a minute left. So, and there's beer already out on the floor, so it seems people are desperate and have gone already. But we're watching this across all the theaters in Big Data London. Let's close this out. I mean, clearly all of you, as I said at the beginning, have research going on, and some of it you're able to talk about, some of it you're not, and that's fine. But what advice would you give, given the pace of technology seems to be getting quicker and quicker these days? what advice would you, what are you seeing that you would sort of give to companies, as to where to invest in the next 12 months? And I don't mean, besides telling me they should all buy your software, I mean, I'd like a little bit more futuristic than that. I mean, what problems are you seeing that are coming that we perhaps haven't taken seriously enough?
I could start. I think for the coming year or two, agentic AI applications will be big. Companies should pay attention to that. Multimodality is starting to mature. That's another big trend. And then the third thing, which is less of a product but more like a viewpoint, is it's important to start thinking of data and AI together as opposed to like separate, which is often the functions are separate. There's just a lot of connectivity between these areas, and it's extremely important for companies to view that through one lens moving forward.
I'll add to that because I think it bridges what you just said. Data and AI, I think the center of gravity is changing a little bit, where people looked at data and they were like, what can I glean from it in terms of insights? Now data is needed to ground your models, right? And I would add automation to that. So it's data, AI, and automation. If you can bring that together and start looking at use cases in the enterprises that drive enterprise value, because otherwise point cases will be productivity here and there. If we're looking at productivity at scale for business processes, that will be data, AI, and automation.
Okay, so but we're not talking about, I mean, in the past we've designed, data stores. We put data in it, we've engineered data, then we do the analysis. Are we saying that's all going to get thrown out of the window? Is it just like, bring together the appropriate data, whether it's structured, semi-structured, or unstructured, and tie it together with the appropriate models, and techniques and practices of the past are out the window?
I would say it differently. I think there's a lot of things that we do that we will continue to do. However, customers I talk to are putting AI into production. They are seeing value from it. They're finding ways to be more productive, to save money, to create new lines of business. And I do think the customers that really embrace AI and change their workflows and help their people learn these new tools will start to set themselves apart from those that don't. So I think the imperative for all of us is to really think through how we can take advantage of this new technology to move faster.
Okay, well, look, that's been really, really helpful. Thank you all for coming. Please help me congratulate our panel on great answers over the debate. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
So go enjoy your beer, guys. I mean, there's plenty out there on the show floor. So thanks again for coming. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.